And when I refer to intensity, this is a tricky term, especially when I speak to endurance athletes or endurance coaches. Intensity is not the same as effort all the time. And this is especially true when we start to get into endurance activities. In endurance activities, you can have activities which are very, very high effort level, but relatively low intensity. The easier way to think of it, or the more appropriate way to think of it, especially in terms of resistance training, or if we're actually thinking of this on a continuum of athletic development, is that intensity refers to the highest level that athlete would be operating at under race-like conditions, or even faster than race-like conditions, or higher force demand than race conditions. So, for example, a runner may plan out their marathon at 5-minute mile pace. That is pretty intense, right? I think for most of us in here, we could go out and run a 5-minute mile, and that alone would be very intense. We have an elite marathoner, perhaps they're planning their entire, to run all 26.2 miles at 5-minute mile pace. For them, that is a fairly intense workout. If they were to do quarter miles at 60 seconds, meaning 4-minute mile pace, that would be even more intense. But to have them go on a long run, say a 20-mile run or 25-mile run, while that may require a lot of effort for them, especially in miles 20 through 25, just by the nature of the fact that we are sustaining it for that long period of time means that it also has to have a fairly low intensity. So when we look at intensity for the purposes of this presentation, and if you're actually going to be working in speaking a common language with sports sciences, that we need to examine intensity not so much with effort, but with how it relates to maximal performance. Volume refers to the quantity of work performed. And I think this is where most endurance athletes spend most of their time in, is they're focusing on volume, meters swum, miles per week, etc. How many miles are you riding in a day, in a session, and so forth. Total volume, that kind of thing. But what we're going to see here is that while volume is probably the most important issue, you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck by spending quite a bit of time on intensity. And when we're dealing with resistance training for endurance athletes, we don't want to get caught up into thinking that this is something where we need to or are going to have to spend a lot of time with a lot of volume. We want to be focusing on a high intensity range of the spectrum, which by its very nature is going to dictate that we're not going to be able to do a lot of volume. And in doing that, we're going to find that we're going to get a lot more bang for our buck. Okay, this next definition here is going to be one that's really critical to this entire presentation, and that's running economy. Running economy refers to how efficiently the body uses oxygen while it's running. And what we're going to be doing here with resistance training, if we follow the best practices that I give here, is that we're trying to make the body more efficient at running at a given speed by using less oxygen, or using the same amount of oxygen consumption but running faster. And there's a ton of research coming out right now that resistance training, especially resistance training with high loads, resistance training at higher velocities, is having a profound impact on running economy. So that means if I do something as simple as resistance training using appropriate methods, that I can actually improve my running without doing anything different to my running workouts. I'll find that I run faster, easier. I'll find that my long runs are easier because I'll be using less oxygen consumption. I'll feel that I can handle uphills and downhills more efficiently because I'll have muscular strength and it will be taxing a little bit less taxing to me. So running economy, and this has a little bit of interplay also with swimming as well, and to a lesser extent with cycling, is going to be profoundly impacted by resistance training. Now, Tim Noakes, who wrote the great book lore of running, he put out a couple points here, most of which are on this list. And he said that the factors that affect running economy are biomechanics, primarily vertical motion while running, and the technique and type of activity, like how fast you're going, whether it's uphill, downhill, what kind of surface you're running on, etc. Your fitness and training, this is something we're all dealing with as coaches. Individual factors like age, gender, race, weight of clothing and shoes, fatigue, environmental conditions, whether it's hot, cold, etc. And then finally, neuromuscular efficiency. Now, of all these points here, there's a couple that we can't address. There's a couple that we can address here. Fitness and training. I think if we're in this class, we have a general understanding of what we need to do to get someone ready for a triathlon or a marathon or a road race, etc. But what is often less understood is this issue of neuromuscular efficiency and how this ties into not only running economy, but also with overall triathlon performance. Now, I've thrown out this term, neuromuscular efficiency, a couple times already, and I haven't spent the time to actually define it. Neuromuscular efficiency is the ability of the neuromuscular system, which is the combination of the muscular system and the nervous system, to allow the prime movers, synergists, stabilizers, and neutralizers to work together synergistically. Now, this is something that just intuitively we would expect to happen all the time. But the research actually indicates that in untrained individuals, these athletes have what could be deemed as fairly low neuromuscular efficiency. That means when they first go out to do any activity, that their agonists are fighting their antagonists. Their stabilizers are working too hard, and they're actually impeding the movement. This is one of the reasons why we see that the best way to increase running economy or cycling economy or swimming economy is to just do the activity. Right? And you saw while you were doing yoga poses in the previous presentation that certain muscles will turn on as a stabilizing activity or as a safety mechanism. And if you were to practice those novel poses enough, what you'd find is that your body would learn to become more efficient. They would say, hey, we don't need to fire up the glute medius like this because this is a fairly safe position to be in. And then when that glute medius could relax, now you could move deeper into the pose and stretch what you wanted to stretch, or strengthen what you wanted to strengthen. The same thing holds true for any type of activity. You know, we want to become efficient so that we're not trying to essentially play tug of war. We want the muscles that are producing beneficial movement to be highly active, and the muscles which are used for stabilizing or used for slowing down joint activity, etc., to be less active, or to only be working through very short intervals of time, appropriate intervals of time. And what we're going to see here is that resistance training is going to allow us to enhance our neuromuscular efficiency even without doing activities, even without doing those actual activities. So, for example, we can resistance train, and it will have a carryover effect to running and swimming and to a lesser extent cycling. So let's take a look at some of the mechanisms of benefit. Running economy is a result of enhanced neuromuscular characteristics, specifically meaning power development and eccentric strength capabilities. And when I speak of eccentric strength capabilities, I'm talking about how well the muscle handles impact, because ultimately that's what we're dealing with, especially in running, that we are taking impact at the ground, sometimes three to four times body weight impact, and then we're stopping our body because gravity is pulling us down to the ground. We're stopping our body from moving down, and then we are applying propulsive forces up. Well, a lot of us, we just recognize the propulsive forces without recognizing the fact that before we can push up or before we can move forward, we have to stop ourselves from moving down.